Vision Season 2 has been met with very positive reviews, but one episode in particular stands out from the crowd, and is raising questions at mainline Star Wars. Strap yourselves in, guys, because we need to talk about how a 17-minute animation is the key to solving all of Lucasfilm's problems.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
But that's if it's not too late.
Get out of this office right now.
We'll start things off with why Season 2 has been perceived so well, how it's flourished in a space where canon has faltered, and what lessons need to be taken over to live action. But before we start, it's important to note the gravity of what Visions has actually achieved. You see, Visions is non-canon, so whatever happens in these stories doesn't affect the main saga or all the spin-off shows that come afterwards, or even Star Wars Legends. And all of the episodes within Visions Season 1 and 2 originate from outside of Lucasfilm by a mixture of different studios, and they're picked based on their style of storytelling and their style of animations. And they're essentially given one task: create their own version, their own take on what they know about Star Wars. So how is it these outside studios are actually doing a better job than the company that's in charge of Star Wars? Now, there's no hiding from the fact that the fans are 50-50 when it comes to Star Wars at the moment, all really apart from The Mandalorian, which does generally get positive reception from the fans, but we are a hard bunch to please, there's no doubt about it. And I think one of the keys for the way Vision succeeds is because it is non-canon. The expectations are completely off for this show in its episode, so if you get a bad episode or a bad few episodes in a season, it doesn't really matter. These are characters they're using that we don't know. These stories don't affect anything within canon at all. But then when you get a good episode, it really stands out. It's a shining light. For example, Season 1, The Ninth Jedi, was largely seen as the best episode of that season, and Season 2, Journey to the Black Head, is seen as the best episode in Season 2. We're going to actually focus on the latter for a moment. And I'm going to fill you in quickly on this episode, and you'll be amazed that this isn't a George Lucas project. It's set amidst a Jedi and a Sith war, and there's two protagonists that we mainly follow. One of them is a woman called Ara, and the other one is a man called Tool. Now, the antagonist is a Sith called Bisham. The story itself is very simple. Ara isn't Force sensitive, and Tool is. Ara, at the start of the episode, we see her as part of a community. In this community, they are a bit mysterious, but they effectively keep galactic records from what I can make out of it from the past, the present, and the future. Now, they're on a planet with these two giant statues above them. One is called the Dark Head, one is called the Light Head. And these statues have a connection to the Force. And when it rains and you look down at these rocks that this community gather, it reveals something to you. And in this case, it reveals the future. And Ara, who's young at this point in time, there is a bit of a time jump, wants to give some of the knowledge that this community has gathered to the Jedi who are losing the war against the Sith. And then we cut out, because that's forbidden, they're not allowed to do that, they don't get involved. We pick up in present day, and she's around the Order somehow. She's not a Jedi, she's not Force sensitive, but she's among them. So much so that she actually gains an audience with the Jedi Council, and this is, of course, is a Jedi Council without any of the characters we know. And she believes a way to win the war would be to destroy the Dark Head. Therefore, it can't foretell any of the darkness in the future, and therefore it won't happen. That's the logic they're going by. And after a little bit of back and forth between a couple of Jedi Masters, there's a bit of hesitation around it. She's allowed to go on behalf of the Jedi to remove the Black Head, but she's got to take a Jedi with her, and this Jedi is Tool. Now, Tool's interesting as a character. He's a Jedi with trauma. We get a brief flashback from Tool when he was on a planet with other Jedi, including his master, and they were all killed by this Sith Lord Bisham. His Jedi Master was impaled in front of him, but he was effectively spared, I believe, by Bisham, because Bisham sensed the darkness within him and saw an opportunity to one day turn him to the dark side. Now, it turns out the planet that they're going to, the planet where Ara grew up, is the planet that Bisham is on, and it's not clear if this is the same planet where Tool first encountered Bisham when his master was killed. But Tool is pulled to the dark side in this episode, and he's kind of like a mashup of Luke and Anakin Skywalker. And Bisham does try to draw the darkness out of him, very much how Dooku tried to do it to Anakin and Vader tried to do it to Luke. Their duels actually echo that of Anakin's and Dooku's and Vader's with Luke, with very similar dialogue. And eventually Tool does give in to the darkness, but he doesn't allow it to consume him. He has a Harry Potter Voldemort moment where he's in a white room and he's confronted with his darker self, and he looks it in the eyes. But essentially Tool finds a way to balance the two. Likewise, on the other hand, Ara's mission is to remove the Dark Head whilst Tool fights Bisham, and she realizes that the two heads are intertwined, they're connected. So if you cut the Dark Head, you're effectively destroying the Light Head as well. So that symbolizes that you can't have one without the other. This episode very much focuses on balance. Where there is light, there will also be darkness. Essentially, although Beesham is killed, their mission to destroy the Darkhead fails, but they've learned a greater lesson in the process. Now, what this particular studio managed to achieve was a compelling original story. The Tall character is very similar to ones we've seen in the past, there's no denying that whatsoever, but that would easily be recreated without the similarities to Luke and Anakin and still follow a similar story. It's a short, simple, effective way to teach the kids that there will always be darkness, but it's about how you overcome, how you deal with it, that defines who you are. As opposed to some of the lessons in the more recent movies, it doesn't matter about your last name or who your family are. I think the animated version is much more compelling and a better story and a better lesson to learn. And of course, George did make Star Wars for kids to teach them these lessons. But they've also created a compelling villain in Beesham as well, who's not the most powerful Sith the galaxy has ever seen, but he's powerful enough to match Tall, and he's powerful enough to be a threat, which still adds to a compelling conflict, a compelling story. You know, the dark side doesn't always have to be bigger and better than before, just as long as it's enough. And of course I'm alluding to the fact that the way they brought Palpatine back in the sequels, even Ian McDiarmid didn't expect Palpatine to come back. But when they do something like that, it does make the galaxy feel very small, which of course it's not. And you've even got threats outside the known galaxy that could easily come in and be very compelling villains. Now, although visually Visions is very different, of course, to what we have with Star Wars, it does really feel like a story that George Lucas would actually tell himself if he was in charge of the project, because it follows similar beats. The protagonists aren't perfect. In fact, this particular antagonist, Tall, has already had the worst trauma of his life happen to him, rather than him being scared of it happening in the future. So it's a different take in that respect. We kind of pick up with the character, we meet him on the other side of the trauma and how he's dealing with it and how he's overcoming it. Now, I really enjoyed Visions Season 2. Some episodes were a bit average, but then there's some episodes in there that really do stand out from the crowd. And I think Lucasfilm going forward should treat Visions as an experiment to see what lands well and what doesn't land well. Look at why, look at the story, look at the characters and what they did to these characters. How can they draw from that going forwards in live action and in other animation shows that they're going to make themselves? And heck, they could even find the studios that do the best episodes of Visions and create a separate universe entirely for them stories. That's not going to affect canon and legends, but there can be some kind of continuation between seasons, perhaps even animated movies. Now, episode 5 of Visions Season 2 is by far my favourite, and it perfectly demonstrates that it is possible to recapture the magic of Star Wars without George Lucas and without any of the original characters. You don't have to reuse them, you just have to reuse the feeling and what them characters represent. Now guys, drop in the comments below what your favourite episode of Star Wars Visions Season 2 is if you've watched it. Remember to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'll catch you in the next one. May the Force be with you.